On the morning of January 5th, 2024, two passenger trains collided head-on at full speed. The impact was so violent it tore carriages off the rails, leaving a trail of wreckage carved through the countryside. It became one of the most mysterious train disasters in Indonesia's history because the entire rail system was built to stop something like this from ever happening. So how did two trains end up sharing the same stretch of track, hurtling towards each other with nobody raising the alarm? Statistically, head-on train collisions are rare, especially on modern railways built with systems meant to keep trains separated at all times. To understand how it happened, we first need to look at the stretch of railway where the collision took place. That railway line is located east of Bandung, one of the largest cities in West Java, and it carried heavy traffic every day. Commuter trains brought workers into the city each morning, while freight and long-distance passenger trains moved through smaller towns like Cicalengka along the same route. But between Haurpugur Station, the smaller station on the eastern side of Bandung, and Cicalengka Station farther down the line, all of that traffic narrowed into a single-track section where trains traveling in opposite directions had to share the same rail. This means that one train had to wait while the other fully cleared the track ahead, which also meant the system separating them needed to be right every single time. That responsibility belonged to what is called a block system. It is a safety system arrangement built around one question before any train could move forward. Is the track occupied or clear? Under normal conditions, the answer should have been simple, but the Haurpugur-Cicalengka section was unusual. The two stations operated using different generations of railway signaling technology, yet both still had to coordinate across the same single-track line. To bridge that gap, railway operators installed a relay interface that translated information between the two systems. When everything worked properly, operators barely noticed it because the communication happened in the background, and for a while, the arrangement appeared reliable. In October 2022, the interface passed operational testing before entering active service, but one specific failure scenario was never simulated, and so, between Haurpugur and Cicalengka, the system linking the two stations carried a weakness no one fully recognized yet, and prior to the accident, that weakness had already started appearing in subtle ways. Months before the collision, the signaling system had begun behaving strangely. Starting around August 2023, the relay interface occasionally generated uncommanded signals. Without any operator requesting it, the system would suddenly display information showing that the block ahead had been cleared, even though no train had actually exited the section and no controller had authorized the movement. That said, these anomalies appeared inconsistently, and when it did happen, the response looked simple enough. Operators would reset the interface, then resume operations. On paper, almost nothing appeared wrong, but there was another problem underneath all of this. No protocol clearly addressed false safe block indications, leaving controllers dependent on a system that could fail in ways the rulebook never fully covered. Over time, the abnormalities became so routine that they were eventually treated as normal. And once dangerous behavior starts looking routine inside a system that revolves around safety, people stop seeing it as a warning. They start seeing it as part of the job, and complacency is a dangerous mindset to have in a system that hinges on complete safety. Just before 6 in the morning on January 5th, 2024, two trains prepared to enter the same single-track section from opposite directions. Train 350, the Bandung Raya commuter service, was traveling south toward Cicalengka, while Train 65A, the Turangga Express, was heading north toward Haurpugur. The planned crossing that morning was supposed to be just like every other day. Train 350 would remain waiting while Turangga cleared the section first, exactly how single-track operations were designed to function. At 5:49 a.m., The controller at Cicalengka picked up the Toka interstation telephone line and attempted to contact Haurpugor. There was no answer, so they tried again, and still nothing. A third and final attempt followed with the same result. But the thing is, the Haurpugor controller was not ignoring the calls. At that moment, they were outside the operations room carrying out departure procedures on the platform, handling normal responsibilities required by the job itself. Inside Haurpugor, the monitor displayed what appeared to be a legitimate safe block indication from Cicalengka, even though no operator there had actually issued it. To the controller looking at the screen afterward, nothing appeared suspicious because the signal matched the crossing arrangement already expected that morning. The track ahead appeared clear. At 5:56 a.m., Train 350 left Haurpugor and entered the single-track section heading south. 3 minutes later, Turangga departed Cicalengka and entered the same section from the opposite direction. Both trains were now moving toward each other on the same line, unaware of the danger closing in fast. At 6:01 a.m., the controller at Cicalengka transmitted a radio instruction telling Turangga to proceed toward Cicalengka, but the train was already moving away from it. Inside both locomotives, the crews still believed the line ahead was clear because every signal they had received said it was. The single-track section curved through open fields between the stations, limiting how quickly either side could visually recognize what was coming. Then, at kilometer 181 plus 700, the impossible finally appeared in front of both crews. Two trains occupied the same track at the same time, barreling towards each other. Turangga conductor Diki Ramdani was positioned behind the locomotive during impact. Later, he would describe hearing a loud noise before everything suddenly went blank. Nearby resident Titi Rohiti remembered the sound differently. She described a long horn, then hearing a heavy bang before looking toward the railway and realizing the trains were still grinding forward after impact because momentum continued forcing steel into steel before the carriages finally tore apart and left the rails. And in the moments right after the crash, what rescuers arrived at would be far more baffling than anyone had expected. Once the dust settled and the screeching steel fell quiet, the derailed carriages didn't come to rest neatly beside the tracks. Instead, they were scattered all over the place. Several slid directly into the surrounding rice paddies where soft ground and narrow access routes immediately complicated rescue operations. Emergency vehicles struggled to reach the wreckage, while responders navigated unstable terrain, searching for trapped passengers inside damaged train cars. A total of 478 passengers had been on board the two trains that morning. 37 were injured and 4 lost their lives. Julian Dwi Sationo, the driver of the commuter line Bandung Raya train, Panisan, his assistant driver, Andrian, a steward on the KA Turangga train, and Enjang Yudi, a security officer at Chimikar station. Residents living near the tracks began helping survivors almost immediately, and witnesses later described passengers emerging from the wreckage with facial injuries and heavy bleeding consistent with a violent forward impact inside crowded passenger cars. Conductor Diki Ramdani regained consciousness inside the wreckage with relatively minor injuries and almost no memory of the crash itself. Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency deployed teams to both the collision site and nearby hospitals, while responders continued working through the destroyed carriages, searching for anyone still trapped inside. Bandung SAR Chief Harry Marantika later explained that derailed train cars blocked both the front and rear approach to the section that had fallen deepest into the paddies, leaving rescuers without any straightforward way to reach parts of the wreckage. Because of that, the final victim was not recovered until 5:29 p.m., nearly 12 hours after the collision. A railway police officer had been crushed between carriages in a position rescuers physically could not reach earlier in the day. So now, the question at the center of everything was how two trains ended up sharing the same track, both heading into the same fatal line. When news of the collision spread, it didn't take long for people to think back to the 1987 Bintaro train crash, a head-on collision in Jakarta that killed over 100 people and still remains Indonesia's deadliest rail disaster. The similarities were hard to ignore. Two trains, one track, the same tragedy that was never supposed to repeat itself. And that's where the unease slowly settled in. On February 16th, 2024, Indonesia's National Transportation Safety Committee released its findings, and the conclusion centered around one devastating detail. During the crucial moment when the phone continued ringing unanswered, the relay interface generated another uncommanded signal, an issue that was dismissed as nothing more than a minor hiccup in the system surfaced at the worst possible time, and no one caught it happening. This also proved that no operator at Cicalengka sent the signal. The tragic downside is that no operator at Hawar Pugor had reason to believe it was false. The system itself created the lie, and no one was able to detect it. It was also discovered that several relay interface components had already fallen outside acceptable testing standards before the collision occurred, meaning the hardware had been degrading while remaining in active service for months. What made the situation worse is that the records that might have exposed the problem barely existed. Why? Because earlier anomalies were never formally logged as signaling faults. The warnings appeared repeatedly, yet, on paper, they remained almost invisible. Investigators later estimated the issue happened roughly 3 times out of every 150 operations, which meant days or even weeks could pass without problems before the failure suddenly returned again. The findings shifted responsibility beyond the controllers working that morning and toward the wider railway system around them. The operators were simply following the information in front of them, but that in itself was part of the problem. The monitor said the track was clear, and the railway operators trusted the monitor. But in this instance, the monitor was wrong at the worst possible time. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and watch the next video.